Today's video is going to be an introduction to soldering. And what we're going to do is solder a wire to one of these terminal pads on this circuit board. And we're going to cover the fundamentals of soldering while we do that. So I'm going to put this away for now. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about our soldering iron tips. I'm going to zoom in on these. If you buy a soldering iron kit, you might not know which tip to go for. And these tips all have different purposes and applications. The finer the tip, like this one, is going to be for smaller applications. A larger chisel tip or this kind of cone-shaped tip are going to be for larger applications. This pad is pretty small, but what we're going to do is we're going to use our chisel tip here. It's already on the iron. It's a little gross, but once I get it cleaned up, you'll be able to get a better look at it. So let's zoom all the way in here. So the goal of the soldering iron is to get a little bit of solder onto the components you're soldering to, heat them up, melt solder onto it to join them. So we'll zoom back out here and go over the rest of what you might need. And obviously you need a soldering iron. I would recommend one that you can adjust the temperature. We're going to be soldering today at around 700 degrees Fahrenheit. So I will get that iron turned on here. And while that's heating up, we'll go over everything else that we have here on our table. First of all is gloves. Solder has lead in it, which is only bad if you ingest it. So as long as you don't eat it, or eat with your hands, you should be fine, but I still recommend gloves, especially if you might burn yourself, which you could. We're not going to need any of these tips. We'll put those away. Here I have just a little metal spudger. We're going to use that to get our paste flux here. It's rosin paste flux. You can use the liquid flux. This is a little bit easier to control where it goes, but it's also a little bit harder to work with. We have our rosin core solder here. You see how fine this is? You don't want to buy like the solid core solder, probably from a hardware store that you might use for pipe fitting or even stained glass or something like that. You want solder that's for electrical applications. The next thing I have is solder wick. We'll go over how to use this. This is a copper braid wire with like powder flux in it, and that will draw solder into it. So we'll go over how to fix mistakes if you goober something up. Then I have a brush here with the bristles cut off so that it's very stiff, and we're going to use that to clean the flux off of stuff when we solder. I got snips here if you need to snip wire or snip the solder wick. And then last, I have a pair of tweezers. Oh, and don't forget alcohol. I use 90% isopropyl alcohol. We'll use that to clean the flux off everything. So I'm going to get our board here in the middle, zoom way in on it. So what I'm also going to do is take a couple pieces of Kapton tape here and tape my board down. This is just a practice board, so I'm not going to tape over any of the other spots, just because I don't really care if I get solder on everything. But we got our iron heated up and got our sponge. I'm going to go get that wet. So we've got our freshly wet sponge, and I'm going to hold the iron over the board a lot during this video. You don't want to really ever do anything with the iron over the board unless it is soldering, because you don't want to accidentally drip solder. Move my light here. See if you guys can see this a little better. There we go. I like it right there. So you can see it's kind of yucky looking. I'm going to clean it up here with the wet sponge, and then we'll see what it looks like. So you can see it's nice and shiny, even has a little glob of solder on it. The mistake I see a lot of people do is, let's say we're gonna pick, we'll pick one in the middle to be difficult. This one with the 2 dots above it. What I think people probably do is they get a big glob of solder. So I'm gonna show you how to do it wrong. Get a big glob of solder on here. And then with no flux, they try to put it on this pad. Okay, did you see what happened? I now have solder connecting all 3 of these pads together. I didn't use any flux, I just globbed it on there. That is not good. So I'm gonna try to get the rest of this off here with my sponge. Try to get a relatively clean iron. So how can I fix that if I really gum something up? I'm gonna come in here with the solder wick. You see how that changed to a silver color, move up a little bit and hit it again. Now this copper braid will conduct heat, so if you're grabbing it barehanded, it could burn you a little bit. So I'll put the iron, okay, I think we've got it all up. So I'll take a closer look at it. Yep, it looks like they're no longer connected. Well, you always want to coat your iron with some solder after you're done using it. You don't want the actual iron part to oxidize, you want the solder to oxidize. So it'll look yucky, but the iron underneath, you want to protect it. So we're going to hit it here with the cleaning brush real quick and just see what that looks like. And then I also have a paper towel here with me for drying some of this stuff off. Okay, it looks like we don't have any electrical connections anymore between our pads. We really want to prevent that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the spudger here. I'm just going to stick this right here so you can see it. Ooh, that's close up. Looks like Mars. Get a little bit of this paste flux on here. Get real close. Just a little bit on there. Let's see how well I can do it. So I had way too much solder on the iron when I was purposely trying to mess it up. Let's see how much I have on now. Yeah, just a smidge. So we want to, before we solder the wire on there, we want to have a little bit of solder on this pad. So the flux is going to carry the heat, and we're just going to zap this super quick. So we're going to put the iron on and then the solder super fast and then pick it up just a little bit. That should do it. Put a little bit of solder back on this iron here. Put it away. Now we're going to clean. Dry. You don't have to dry. You might not be able to. It's just going to make it easier to see. So it looks like I don't have any sort of electrical connection between the pads there. The next thing I want to do is get my wire. So I've already stripped the wire, but you can see it's got loose strands. We don't want to just put a loosely stranded wire onto our circuit board. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some flux paste on there, and I'm just going to kind of push it on. And now that we have some flux on there, hope you can't see it, gonna pinch the wire to get it back to kind of a round shape here. And we're going to do what's called tinning the wire. So we're going to get our iron here. Going to get a little bit of solder on it. Once again, I'm operating kind of right above where I want to solder. You don't want to do this. You want to do this off to the side. But I'm going to get a little bit of solder on here. A little more. Now I'm going to glide this wire up and down one time. Actually, I'm going to move this whole contraption forward so you can see the wire better. Yeah. So I'm going to glide it all up and down one time. Just like that. Get a little more solder on my iron here. Put it away. Drag this back for you guys. Now you can see the wire has a kind of nasty chrome coloration to it. I'm going to take a little bit of this alcohol and I'm going to clean it right here. You don't want any flux on your wire. Okay, then I'm going to use my paper towel and just glide it down this one time. Get all that stuff off there. Now you'll notice that when the wire is tinned, it'll still flex back here. Ooh. Now you'll... Let's see, let's get it right here. Now you'll notice when the wire's tinned, it might still have some flexibility back here where the solder's not at, but out here it's going to be relatively stiff. See how that's... Oh, you can't really see how it's bending at a right angle. That's good. That means the solder kind of stopped right there. That's where we want it to stop. So now we have solder on our wire and we have solder on our pad. This is the part where we're going to perform surgery here. Is we need to get our flux back out. We're going to get more flux on our end of our wire here. Okay, and then I have just a little bit on that spudger, and I'm going to very carefully put it here. Okay, I don't think we can zoom in anymore now. I'm going to get my iron, get just the tiniest bit of solder on there. You don't need to glob and cover up the entirety of what you're soldering. There's a little too much on there. Get it off. Cool. So I'll get a little solder on the iron here, then I'll come back into frame. Could still be too much. We'll see. So I got these two components lined up. You don't want there to be any tension in it because when you heat it up, it'll flick away. So I'm just going to zap this super quick with the iron up and down one time, and it should be good. Okay, I think I hit the pad next to it with a little bit of solder, but it doesn't look like I bridged any sort of connection there. Put some solder back on my iron here. And we're going to get the alcohol, clean this up. And the optional paper towel dry. Now we have a wire soldered to our board. These guys are mechanically connected. So if I want to get this wire off, let's say, oh man, I did the wrong pad. You don't want to rip it because you're going to rip that pad up. You want to heat it and pull it up, which is super easy. So if you're trying to desolder something, like let's say you want to move this wire, you want to get a little bit of solder on your iron because you need a little bit of that solder on there to bridge the gap between the iron and the component you're trying to heat up, just a smidge. So we're just going to heat it up, zap, and then gently lift this up. because we don't want to spray solder everywhere all over the board. So we're just going to tap it real quick and pull it up. Boom, done.